Welcome, fellow explorers. My name is Christian Alexanderson, and this is Hemlocks to Hellbenders, a podcast highlighting Pennsylvania's parks, forests, and great outdoors. It's 1910, and Anthony Wayne Cook has just inherited his family's land. Over the last 80 years, the Cook family had made their money off the land. It started with his grandfather, John Cook, who purchased the land in 1828. He built a sawmill on the property to process the timber he was harvesting from the forest. Andrew Cook, Anthony's father, would go on to build 3 sawmills, a flouring mill, a planing mill, a boat scaffold, several dwellings, and a store on the property. While much of the beautiful landscape had been forested, some of the most stunning examples of ancient forests remain. Andrew passes away in 1891, and now it was Anthony's turn to take over the family business. But he had plans of his own. Anthony Cook wanted to preserve the 300-year-old towering hemlocks on his land for future generations. He wanted everyone to sit at the altar of the so-called Forest Cathedral. In 1936, a gentleman named I.M. McCreet wrote a book detailing Anthony's attempt to preserve Cook Forest. In it, he tells the story of how Anthony would encourage guests to go on a car ride through the forest, and just a few miles from the house, his chauffeur would feign car trouble. This gave Anthony the perfect opportunity to amaze his guests. Here's a brief passage about the encounter in the book. Too bad that something had to go wrong with the car so far from home, but to walk would do them good, Cook would comment as he led the way into the silent temple of the gods, and then listen to the exclamations of astonishment that were sure to come from those who followed along the fern-bound path in this fairyland. Often there was heard no comment, for in this silent cathedral of the Almighty, it was unuttered. Frequently, it was observed that sturdy men could not restrain the tears, at the grandeur and solemnity of the environment. I had the same feeling more than 100 years later when I stepped into the Forest Cathedral and stood among the old-growth forests. While I'm not a religious man myself, it's difficult not to feel a larger presence when you step into something so beautiful. Frank Lloyd Wright once said, "I believe in God, only I spell it nature." Over the next 16 years, Anthony Cook and others campaigned to preserve this magnificent landscape. In the 1920s, the Cook Forest Association was formed to save the few acres of surviving old-growth timber. Endorsed by national and natural resource groups and Governor Gifford Pinchot, the association raised $200,000, which helped the Commonwealth purchase 6,055 acres from A. Cook Sons Company in 1927 for $640,000. Cook Forest became the first Pennsylvania state park acquired to preserve a natural area, and was later designated a National Natural Landmark. Now, we have Cook Forest State Park. It has 11 different old-growth forest areas comprising over 2,300 acres of various types of old-growth forest. It's been called the best old-growth forest in America. But before we learn more about the park, here's the stats. Cook Forest State Park includes a 8,500-acre park and 3,135 acres of Clarion Riverlands located in Clarion, Jefferson, and Forest counties. Available activities include hiking, picnicking, overnight accommodations, wildlife watching, fishing, hunting, biking, horse riding, kayaking, sledding, cross-country skiing, and ice skating. A notable feature of the park is its old-growth forest areas. The park is named for the Cook family, who purchased the land in the 1800s, timbered it, and eventually helped preserve it. Nearby towns include Leeper, Marionville, and Clarion. State lands that are close by include State Game Lands 24, 283, and 63, Clear Creek State Park, and Corn Planter and Clear Creek State Forest. You may enjoy the park if you enjoy ancient forests. I'm excited to welcome Dale Luthringer to the podcast. Dale is the Environmental Education Specialist at Cook Forest State Park. Dale, thanks so much for joining the program.
Thanks, Christian, for having me on.
How would you describe Cook Forest to someone who's never been there before?
Well, I would argue it's the finest place in the entire state of Pennsylvania to see old-growth hemlock and white pine. It's a large portion of it is a registered national natural landmark because of its old-growth qualities, and also has a national wild and scenic river flowing through it.
Yeah, I was lucky enough to visit Cook Forest a couple times. It really has that stunning, ethereal sort of feel when you visit there.
Yeah, I mean, you look back, I know when I was younger, I was thinking, what would an old forest look like? What would it look like, when the pioneers first came through? Well, it's come to Cook Forest because some of these trees started to grow not long after Christopher Columbus landed in the New Worlds. We have trees that we've documented almost 500 years in regards to actual ring counts. So, you want to know what it looks like. All you have to do is drive up to Cook Forest and get up into the Forest Cathedral or many of the other old growth forests that we have in the park.
What do you love most about the park?
One of the things I think I like the most about it is when you get here, a lot of times your cell phone doesn't work, and you're forced to experience the outdoors. And a lot of people come here for a vacation, and I think the first thing a lot of them experience is technology withdrawal. Well, if you're here for a vacation, this is the place to come, because once you drop down into the valley, you don't have that reliable connection. So, it's like taking a step back in time. I mean, even not just, several hundred years ago, if you were to think to walk into the old woods, but I mean, even before the days that everybody was wearing cell phones around their necks, that kind of a thing. So it's a special place. It's slowed down, and it's just a wonderful place to be.
You mentioned it a little bit earlier. Can you tell us about the Forest Cathedral natural area and how visitors can visit it?
Yeah, so the outlined acreage of that is a little under 800 acres. It's a registered national natural landmark due to the exceptional historical qualities of the trees. They've been here over 200 years longer than our nation, and they've experienced a lot of that history. And we sometimes say the history is written in their rings. So, you can look back and kind of get an idea on maybe how good things were growing certain years compared to others. And we have some of the tallest known hemlocks and white pines, certainly in the Northeast and in Pennsylvania. You can access it. There's a multitude of trails that crisscross within the Forest Cathedral, but the main named trail would be the Longfellow Trail, and probably the easiest place to access one of those trailheads would be at what we call the Log Cabin Inn Environmental Learning Classroom.
Other than the Forest Cathedral, there are 10 areas of the park where visitors can see old-growth timber. Where do you recommend visitors go?
Well, it all depends upon their physical ability. Probably once you've seen the Forest Cathedral, I mean, if they can do steep hills, not everybody can do that. I would suggest going up the Seneca Trail and coming back down the Mohawk Trail. Both of those are accessed near the park office, and that particular old growth forest, we call it the Seneca Forest, has our tallest hemlocks in the park, which are also the tallest known hemlocks in Pennsylvania, and also the tallest known hemlocks known in the northeastern United States. And some very old trees in there, certainly 300 plus years old. There very well could be some 400-year-old trees in there. We know we found a couple of them in the Forest Cathedral, and this woods is kind of like on the other side of the highway, and it's really the same kind of forest. It's just split by a highway with a different name on one side. So, but if they can't do steep hills, a little bit less in terms of elevation would be the Cook Trail, and our friends group has been busy over the years keeping that trail up and helped us put up some interpretive signs along that trail talking about various aspects of old growth forests. And that's a nice loop trail, maybe a little over a mile. And it's not as spectacular as the Forest Cathedral or the Seneca Forest, but it still has old white pines in there, and old hemlocks and white oaks, chestnut oaks that are going to go over 300 years. And that one's a little up, about a mile or so upriver from the park office behind our river cabin area.
When we're talking about size of these old growth trees, what are we talking about? I mean, it's hard to imagine, especially, I've been on Longfellow Trail, to kind of look up and understand what are the size of these really old trees.
Well, one of the misconceptions people have when they come here is they think they're going to see, gargantuan trees like the redwoods and the big Doug firs from out west. And, we don't have trees like that really, anywhere in the eastern United States. Our big trees would be conifers that are 3 foot diameter and greater. Now, our biggest conifers are pushing 5 foot across, which is massive. Our big trees, that's kind of what we're looking at, is a forest of 3 to 4 foot diameter hemlocks and white pines, which is extremely rare to find anywhere in Pennsylvania. But here, It's we almost take it for granted, because as soon as you step into the woods in one of our old growth forest areas, 9 times out of 10, that's what you're going to see. And in terms of height, for a long period of time, we had the tallest known white pine north of the Smoky Mountains at about 185 feet.
Wow.
And that blew down in a big windstorm back in 2018. But we still have white pines that are approaching right at that 170-foot tall mark. And those are the tallest trees known in Pennsylvania. We have some friends up in the Mohawk Trail State Forest. They currently have the tallest known tree in the Northeast, which is a white pine at about 175 feet. And but the tallest white pine that we know of in the East is down in the Smokies, and those are going just over 190 feet. So, and tulip trees will get up that high, although ours aren't that high here. They're still up there, but they're nowhere near that range. But when you go into the Forest Cathedral, the average height of our old growth white pines is pushing about 150 feet. So to kind of get a perspective of that, I mean, you're looking at roughly a 15-story building if you're in the city.
Yeah, wow.
And that we call it a Forest Cathedral because the canopy is closed and it's really high. Like if you were to walk into a large church cathedral, the ceiling is way up there. So that's the whole reference of why we call it the Forest Cathedral.
So much of Pennsylvania was clear cut in the late 1800s, early 1900s. How did these trees survive?
Well, it was a battle. The Cook family were a lumber family, and but even from the beginning, they had argue conservation ethic, but it was the Cook and Sons Lumber Company are the ones who owned this, and it was a battle within the family when when the forests around here started to diminish, what they were going to do with it. And it was a 18-year battle within, between the family and trying to get it established as a state park so that it wouldn't be timbered out. And really, at the end of that, it became a state park, and would be we say it was the first state park that was created to preserve a natural area.
Along with the Forest Cathedral on Longfellow Trail, they'll also be able to see the Memorial Fountain. Can you tell us about this historic structure?
Yeah, the Memorial Fountain. I mean, it's spring fed. It's a sandstone hand-hewn structure with brass plates on it, and on the brass plates are listed folks from the Cook Forest Association, many prominent individuals who fought the battle to save this forest back in the early 1900s, and those plates I think were put up in either the 40s or the 1950s, and so yeah, it's one of the icons here in the forest, one of the things to see. But if it wasn't for those folks who fought that battle about 100 years ago, we wouldn't have Cook Forest as it is today.
The park has 47 miles of hiking trails to explore. Do you have any trail recommendations other than the ones you've listed?
Yeah, there's so much to see. The first time they're here, we certainly, you got to get up into the Forest Cathedral area. After that, we would suggest folks to also go to Seneca Point Overlook and the Fire Tower. They're both really close together. You can drive and get to within about a quarter mile, and there's a short trail system up there to get a wonderful scenic view from either the Overlook or from just underneath the box at the top of the tower. We talked about the Cook Trail, which is nice. If you're not into elevation, you can. Not everybody has great knees anymore, and if you want to stay in the old growth forest and be flat, we would suggest that you walk like the Tom's Run Trail, the Liggett Trail, the Birch Trail. Those you can access. Most of those you can access from the park office, and they go up the scenic Tom's Run Valley, which is at the base of the Forest Cathedral, and you're in old growth forest almost the entire time. So really, it all depends upon how adventurous you are, what your physical abilities are. There's really something for everybody. Also, our friends group, again, Friends of Cook Forest, we're instrumental in helping us create our paved sensory trail, which has braille signs on them. Other folks who have various physical impairments, it's like has braille signs around the edge of this paved trail within the forest near the sawmill center area, and it's maybe quarter mile long, and it has a guide wire around the edge, so folks can hold on to the wire if they want to walk, and if they can't see very well or have other disabilities, and those wires will take them right to these braille signs. So that's pretty neat too. So there's really something for everybody here in regards to hiking trails.
Yeah, that Century Trail is really special. I mean, I've been to all the state parks and forests here in Pennsylvania. I've been to a lot of state parks around the East Coast, but that's something that I thought stood out as such an incredible way to make nature accessible to people who might not be able to experience it all the time. My wife and I took that trail just to be able to see it, just to be able to like go through and see what the trail is all about. And I just thought it was such a wonderful idea. I think it's been done really well.
Well, thank you. And really, it was really from the instigation, really, of our friends group that all that was completed. And so, I mean, yeah, most of us have the privilege of are blessed with sight, but to kind of get an idea of what it might be like with somebody who can't see or can't see very well. I mean, close your eyes or put a blindfold on and go all the way around that trail, and you're forced to listen to what's going on around you. I mean, you pay attention to the wind through the hemlocks. You can hear the chipmunks. You can hear the various bird species, going on, and you're forced to use your sense of smell, and see, it's like you're seeing through your nose what else may be out there, So you're forced. Those of us who take for granted a lot of our, of our senses, you go through there and you think about it. Not everybody is, has the same physical ability, and it's really nice to have something up there for folks who have a hard time getting around.
Speaking of there being a trail for everybody, there's also a swinging bridge in the park. What trail can visitors take to walk across that bridge?
Yeah, that's probably, I'd say that's easiest to access by the park office. You can make a little loop out of it. You can go up the Liggett Trail, cross the swinging bridge over Tom's Run, and then come back the rhododendron trail through our Indian cabin area where the children's fishing pond is. It's, again, it might be a quarter-mile loop, and the bridge is maybe about 15, 20 feet over the creek, and the span might be around 100 feet. So it's pretty neat when you go over. I can't think of another one anywhere in state parks if there is. I'm not familiar with one, but it's pretty neat. I mean, years ago they used to have a swinging bridge actually across the Clarion River, but that was way upriver. And so you think about how long the spans are. I mean, that span would probably be about a 75-yard span, with a lot of logistical stuff to think about these days, But to have a smaller one here at Cook Forest, it's one of those icons that when you come here you need to see. I mean, you got to go to you got to get into the Forest Cathedral, you got to see Seneca Point, Fire Tower, Memorial Fountain, Swinging Bridge, and then it's like, now what else do you do? Well, you got the whole Clarion River to explore.
Well, that's a perfect segue. Also associated with the park is the 3,136-acre Clarion Riverlands. What are some of the ways visitors can explore this beautiful section of the river?
Well, yeah, there's a lot more hiking trails downriver, and they're on both sides of the river, the north and the south side. The north side of the river, those trails are easier to access. The south side of the river, you got to have some physical ability because you're starting at the hilltop and you're dropping down into the Clarion River Valley. The area is beautiful, but whatever you drop down, I mean, you're dropping maybe 300 to 500 vertical feet. You're going to have to eventually come back up. So, and it's the same on the other side, but there's I want to say the trails are more forgiving, put it that way. But they're just beautiful sections down along the river. I'm more familiar actually with the south side, and so we've got Blyson Run, Maxwell Run come in from the south, and they're beautiful hemlock sheltered streams with little waterfalls along the way, and it's just picturesque. They're beautiful second growth forests, and some of those second growth forests were right on the edge of calling them old growth. I mean, we haven't cored any trees in there yet to get some just good numbers, but they're showing signs, just starting to show signs of old growth forest, and a lot of times at around 150 years is when we start to see some of these characters show up. So it'd be curious to see. Though there's some select really old trees in there, and on the north side we actually did find what's one of our old growth forest areas. We cored some old hemlock and some old birch in there to over 300 years old, and it's real steep hillside. It's bouldery. There's a trail at the very top of the hill, but you really can't see it from there. So it's I don't want to say inaccessible, but I mean it's unless you like to go off trail and walk steep in a roadie forest with bowling ball sized rocks covered with moss, most people aren't going to really go in there. But those are some of the areas that are just they're like little surprises, like wow, we didn't know this was there. And in areas like that, that particular area we had bald eagles nesting in there. They prefer the structure of these big old white pines over some of the other species of trees. So it's kind of neat to see the wildlife gravitating towards some of these areas.
And I have to say, I think that's one of the best things about Cook Forest is that while I've only gone a couple times, you can't see everything in one visit, not unless you're spending weeks and weeks there. It makes me want to keep going back up. It's like you go to the Forest Cathedral, you go check out the Memorial Fountain, the overlook, and things like that, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh wait, what about the Riverlands? I wonder what's going on down there. Then you can spend days and days just exploring that. It must be rewarding to see people come and explore, and as they're going through and realizing there's so much more they need to see.
Yeah, there's no way you can see it in one week vacation. People have been coming here for a long time. I mean, I've been working here almost 30 years, and I'm still seeing new places. I'm thinking, I've seen it all, there's no more big trees to experience or any new forest, And then I find something, it's like, oh my, it's all brand new again, And then, in the wintertime, in the summer it's so busy, and in the wintertime, it kind of quiets down. But when the snow comes, it's like you're seeing the park from a totally different perspective. It's like new again. We have people who have made family traditions out of coming to the park for decades, over a century, some of them. And we had one thing we do at the park we try to do every year for one of our holiday programs in the summer, and get an idea for how long people have been coming to the park. And it's kind of neat. I remember when I first started working here, there was an older gentleman. I remember his name was Mr. Carney, and he would come to all the programs. And so the first time I'd done this, he was in the crowd, and I started asking, okay, everybody put their hands up. This is your first time you've been coming here. A lot of people put their hands. And then I said, okay, now I want everybody to put their hands up who you've been coming here for at least 5 years. Okay, keep your hands up. So a lot of hands go up. Okay, keep your hands up if you've been coming here 10 years. And then a couple hands drop. We keep going 20 years, 30 years, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 years. There's one hand left up, and it was Mr. Carney. And I said, well, how long have you been coming here? He says, Dale, I've been coming here for 86 years. And since I was 6 months old, and the only years I wasn't here was when I was over fighting in Europe in World War II.
That's so great.
I'd never had anybody beat that, he would, his grandkids, his great grandkids. I mean, they were there every summer, and they're one of many families that have been doing that since the beginning of the creation of the park, and it was long a state park before it was long a park before it was designated a state park. We have some neat historical photos of, they even had called the Cooksburg Band. We have them marching with looks like when it was a regular band. They had drums, they had a horn, wind instruments and everything, and they were marching down River Road here. It was just so it was people would come here from the big cities to get into the clean air. They'd escape Pittsburgh with the coal back in the day, and the coal dust and all that. They would be prescribed by their doctors to come to Cook Forest, and so yeah, it's a tradition, and it is. I've been here a long time, and you still find new things. It's a wonderful place to work.
And now, let's hear from our sponsors. Keystone Trails Association is headed to Lake Raystown. Join KTA April 25th to 27th for Spring Hiking Weekend 2025 at Lake Raystown, presented by the Huntington County Visitors Bureau. 3 days of hikes, outdoor activities, and programming awaits. Visit kta-hike.org to register and for more information. Are you looking for your next adventure? Unlock some of the best landscapes in Pennsylvania with incredibly detailed, highly curated, waterproof trail maps from the folks at Purple Lizard. They create extraordinary maps of Pennsylvania state forests for people who love to explore the outdoors. Find them at your local outfitters, bike shops, and bookstores, or visit purplelizard.com, where your next adventure begins. Walk, run, or roll to save the trees. Join the Pennsylvania Parks and Forest Foundation for the Bob Ross Run for the Trees Happy Little 5K. Proceeds from registration go towards planting trees in Pennsylvania state parks and forests. This virtual 5K can be done anywhere, anytime, April 19th to the 27th, 2025. And participants get cool swag. Learn more or sign up at ppff.events/runforthetrees. Looking for a way to add some local Pennsylvania flair to your space? Check out Sister Sunflowers. They create unique stickers inspired by small local spaces that make your community shine. From quirky caves to hidden gems, their stickers bring your favorite places to life. Perfect for your laptop, water bottle, or anywhere that needs a little hometown love. For both locals and visitors, there's stickers, magnets, prints, and more celebrating Pennsylvania's most iconic parks and forests. And for more avid explorers, there's even a hand-drawn poster to keep track of the Pennsylvania state parks and forests that you've been to. Use the code HELLBENDER15 at checkout to get 15% off your first order. Support local, inspire adventure, and decorate with meaning, only at Sister Sunflowers. Shop now and celebrate the places that make your town special. All right, back to the show. I'm often asked, what's your favorite park? What's your top 5 best parks? Things like that. I truly believe that Cook Forest is easily a top 5 park, and if people were to say it's their favorite park, I could totally agree. I mean, it is a stunning piece of nature, and the fact that we have it here and it's free to visit just makes it even better.
Yeah, I mean, I'm obviously biased towards Cook Forest.
Yeah.
To me, there's no other park that comes close, but I do have a nice hankling for Ricketts Glen, all those beautiful waterfalls in the old growth forest. Ohio Pile is wonderful. There's old growth there, beautiful river running through it. So, there's state parks. We've got a lot of state parks across Pennsylvania, and, they're all fairly close to everybody. Within 20 miles or less, there's a state park nearby for everybody in the state. Every single one of them, they don't have old growth forest, or maybe they don't have a national wild and scenic river, but every one of them has something special that's there and has a unique attribute that makes it just a wonderful place to go.
Couldn't agree more. The park has several overnight accommodations available, including tent sites, electric sites, river camping, and rustic cabins. Can you tell us about them?
Yeah, so campsites, we've got almost 200 campsites. A lot of them are electric. A number of them are for full hookup. A number of those, we allow pets. We have 2 cabin rental areas, the Indian cabins and our river cabins. The Indian cabins are close to the park office. They all sleep 4 with a central bathroom facility, running water bathrooms. The the river cabins are upriver about a mile from the park office, and they don't have running water, but there's 2 of them. They're small, like the Indian cabins that sleep 4, but our larger cabins up there, some of them sleep over 10.
Oh, wow.
So they're pretty. They're all nice. They were all built by the CCCs back in the 30s, early 30s, and they've all been converted to gas heat. They all have electric. They got gas stove. They got a refrigerator. Bunk beds. I mean, they're nice. Now they're rustic. they don't have running water bathrooms in them, but if you like, the beauty, I think one of the beauties of Cook Forest is there's many different private cabin and campground places adjacent to the park. So, if you want, a cabin that's got all the amenities of home, running water, bathrooms, and showers inside, and all of that, there's many very nice private cabin places and nice campgrounds around the park, places to eat. I mean, a lot of times we have a hard time promoting people getting out in the country to see some of these incredible places because there isn't a lot of public amenities or businesses that are nearby to help take care of some of the logistics of all of that. Here at Cook Forest, you've got everything. I mean, you've got the wonderful, beautiful outdoor scenery. You've got some nice amenities that the state park has. But I mean, if you want to get a really nice cabin, if you want to stay in a really nice lodge, or get a real nice meal, or just something quick, you get a burger and fries or something. There's get some ice cream. You need to get gas. I mean, everything is right here. It's like its own little city. I like to say we're the western gateway to the Pennsylvania Wild. Just like this is where it all starts.
Yeah. Yeah, that was one of the biggest things I was surprised with during my the camping trip I took there. Was like, oh, this isn't. You expect a park of this size and with its old growth forest to kind of be in the middle of nowhere because it would make sense. But all of a sudden, you're like, there's really good restaurants around here. There's great places to stay. There's things to do outside of the park. That was a really nice treat when I visited.
Yeah, it makes it easier. I mean, if you think about it, a lot of us between the parks and the businesses, when people come here, we want them to stay. We just don't want them to come and see the old growth forest and leave. We want them to stay for a couple of days. And, so it benefits everybody through here, the local businesses, the state park. We all work together, and it's an incredible place, and I just can't say enough about it.
The Civilian Conservation Corps played a big part in the creation of the park. What was some of the work they did?
Well, they built roads, they built bridges, they planted many acres of trees. They built all our cabins, our 2 Indian cabin colonies, the log cabin inn. They pulled a lot of currant, is a type of a shrub of sorts, flowering plant that is a native plant, but it can harbor the white pine blister rust. So they were worried about that back in the day. So I remember talking with a number of our CCC boys when I first started working here. It says, we pulled so much currant, they're just pulling it. Nowadays we're doing other things with invasive species between insects and plants. But it's kind of, you think about it, back in the day, those guys were doing it too. And, and they were, when they were here, I mean, when the platoon first came here, they didn't have barracks. They had to build their barracks. And so the first winter they were here, they were in tents. And we got pictures of that. I had a really neat story. I got to talk with our CCC superintendent. When I first started working here, this gentleman was in his 90s. And I was asking him, what the river was like. And back then in terms of, the pollution aspect of it. But I was asking if he had any, interesting memories. And he says they were here a couple of winters, several winters, but one winter they were here, it was extremely cold. I mean, they registered temperatures irregularly in the minus 30s. They had one that was in a minus 40, low minus 40s. And there was a gentleman who lived nearby. I forget his first name. His last name was Fulmer, and one of his descendants was actually a ranger here for almost 40 years. I got to meet him. But he said Fulmer, he would walk to work, and he lived about 3 miles straight line distance through the woods. He would walk to work in the morning, and he'd walk back at the end of the day. And he walked, and even in that extreme bitter colds, and he says, I remember the one day when Fulmer came in, and he had this long mustache beard, and he said he couldn't believe the icicles on Fulmer's beard. He came all the way in, and he had, like, he was exaggerating, like 6, 8, 10-inch long icicles on his beard, and he worked the day, and then he'd walk all the way back home, and this gentleman, the CCC superintendent, he actually, he was recently married, and they had just finished some of the Indian or river cabins, and he says, this cabin up here on the hill, he says, this is where we had our honeymoon, so he'd drive to work in the old Model A, I think it was, back in the time frame. He says, Dale, he says, the only heat we ever got off of that is what came through the floorboards. There was no heat. So just being able to talk with these guys and the things that, and they're no longer with us, but they used to have reunions here at the park. So it was special for them. They made the memories. They made a lot of our original trails or enhanced trails that were already here, and their legacy still lives on over 100 years. Almost 100 years later.
What's the log cabin in?
It's a big log cabin, and it used to function as a type of a restaurant. Some of the older folks might remember the Log Cabin Inn chain of restaurants, but it was built in 1937. I'm not exactly sure what its first function was, but I believe in the 40s is when they started, or late 30s, started using it as a type of a concessionaire restaurant. But it's got, an upstairs, downstairs, several rooms, but we've converted it to, show some of our taxidermy mounts, and it's got a big room which we use for classrooms every once in a while. We've got gas heat in it now, and it also houses some another room that's devoted to our lumber history type tools.
Is there something everyone should experience when they visit?
Well, the first thing they have to do, if they haven't seen it, they have to get up into the Forest Cathedral. And then after that, it's the same thing. See the fire tower, see the overlook, and then they need to experience the Clarion River. And that's probably, I want to say, probably the easiest thing to experience, because you can drive your car along it for miles and miles, besides being able to canoe and kayak and all that in it, too.
Is there a part of the park that you think more people should check out? Something that might be undervalued currently?
I can't really think of anything. Sometimes with our bigger events, we try to draw people into areas that are more lightly used, and that's probably been the case with we have a annual French and Indian War encampment that we hold the weekend before Father's Day in June, and that's up there by the Sawmill Center and the Sensory Trail area. And so a lot of people didn't even know the Sensory Trail was there, or the paved trail was there, or what the Sawmill Center folks actually offer up there. And so, yeah, that's another neat place. A lot of folks have been coming here for a while know to go up there, but most of the time I would suggest, is kind of found after people have been here for a bit and are driving around and looking at new areas. But yeah, some of the areas, we Longfellow Trail gets over 20,000 people walk that easily every year, and it gets a lot of pressure. Same thing up with the Seneca Point and the fire tower. Seneca Point and fire tower kind of built to handle that pressure, but a lot of times, if people come to the park, a lot of folks gravitate towards the river. It's the easiest thing to see. And sometimes I have to encourage people to actually, have you been up into the Forest Cathedral? They say, oh, it has big trees, So there's lots of things to see when they're here. Sure.
You spoke about the encampment. What sort of events are hosted at the park?
We do several events. Some are not so big. Others are pretty big. But with the park, we have on Memorial Day weekend, we do a living history event. They just call it Living History Weekend, and so it's like a timeline event of history through the state of Pennsylvania. So we go back with the Indian times, and then we get into the Revolutionary War, Civil War, lumber history, even the War of 1812. We've done World War I, World War II, Korean War, Spanish-American War. Work go all the way through there, and then we bring in various gear. We even had folks in here, with the War on Terror and all of that. So, but we look at the coal mining history, lumber history, It's kind of like pick a subject. If I can find a speaker who's good in a certain area, we try to bring them in, and so it takes a lot of planning, but that one's more of a smaller, localized event. We do volunteer work days at Cook Forest and Clear Creek. So at Cook Forest, maybe we'll have 100 volunteers that come in to help. We assign a whole bunch of different projects that need to be done through the park that our maintenance folks can't necessarily get to. And then at Clear Creek, they hold one at a different time of the year, and they may have 200 people come to that one. So we do a couple of volunteer events. Our largest event is the French and Indian War Encampment by far. So we'll have anywhere from 200 to 300 reenactors that are portraying British, French, colonial, Native Americans in that time for period of our nation's history in the mid-1700s. And we'll get thousands and thousands of people show up for that. And that one, we're generally planning for that one year round. And so the local businesses are also a big help with that. We couldn't run that event without our volunteers, be it our DC and our conservation volunteers or our reenactors, who all of them are volunteering their time when they get here. And so it's a special event. It really is. And now the Sawmill Center, they're a nonprofit group that runs the sawmill area. They do theater productions and things like that. They also have events that they do. They have a wood carving festival. They do a couple of chainsaw events. They have an herb festival. They do a lot of stuff, and they do more events than what we do. So there's a lot to keep folks busy when they get here. So yeah, it's a lot of work, but to see these events come together, it's something to be a part of. It's special.
Do you think there's a best time to visit the park?
Well, I think the best time to visit is you just make time, and whatever that time is, that's your best time, because every season has something to offer. Now, granted, the state park, our facilities for the camping and the cabins, they're not open in the winter, but the park is still open. But a number of the local businesses can fill in with that. But in the wintertime, it's kind of neat because you can see a variety of different animals that aren't as easily viewed in the summertime, So it all depends what you like. If you like it hot, come in the summer. You can, get in the river. If you like the fall foliage, in the fall, you can come up, you can get in the fire tower and the overlook, and you can see the incredible leaves and witness the hawk migration, If you're here in the spring, when the ice breaks out in the Clarion River, you can watch that as the ice comes roaring down the river, And, if you're here in the winter, if we get snow, we can get, do some cross-country skiing and snowshoeing. We've got ice skating rinks, sled riding hills. I mean, it's just whatever you want to do, when you can do it, that's the perfect time to be here.
You mentioned it earlier. What kind of wildlife viewing opportunities are available in Cook Forest and along the Clarion River?
Well, if you go along the Clarion, keep your eyes open for eagles and ospreys, and in the wintertime, you get a good chance to see the river otter that we have here. It's easier in the winter because, they're really dark, and from a distance, they look black, and so they stick out, in the white snow. You can see their trails and things like that. But we've got fisher, black bear, porcupines. I mean, we got, a lot of deer. So it's lots of different wildlife opportunities. Bring your camera. We've got some waterfowl on the river, nothing, really spectacular, but we've got a couple. Chances of seeing mergansers are pretty good, and always see the Canada geese, but every once in a while we'll get oddballs that fly in the springtime. We'll get some loons and some other odd birds that'll come through. But if you're on the river, keep your eyes open for eagles. Really good chance of seeing that, and maybe some river otter.
Dale, do you have any tips for people who plan on visiting the park, or any suggestions to make their visit as enjoyable as possible?
I would try and decide when you're coming here as far ahead as possible. They can reserve cabins up to 11 months in advance. If you trying to get a cabin in the summer. If you wait and think, oh, well, let's go to Cook Forest and we'll get a cabin, and it's a week, next week, or a couple days from now, chances of finding one are going to be pretty slim. Some of our local cabin areas, they're so busy that unless the people who were there a year ago aren't coming on that specific date, you're probably not going to even get into them. So, but every once in a while they'll have some that are definitely open. So I guess I'm saying is plan ahead, call and reserve a spot as far ahead of time as you can. Our campground often is full on holiday weekends, especially it was crazy during COVID. It was hard to find a spot throughout the entire summer, but our campground isn't as busy as it was back then right now, but it's still busy. But whether you're camping or you're trying to find a cabin, I would suggest to reserve as far ahead of time as you can.
And you kind of already mentioned cell phone service is non-existent, so don't depend on that or, necessarily your GPS.
Yeah, I think we have more problems with the GPS people, the directions of GPS. They send them out in Timbuktu, to where, why are you going that way? I mean, one, it's super long, and then, anyway, so it's there. When you get a lot of people have grown dependent on directions off of a computer, and when you get here at Cook Forest, you just got to use some common sense to get around, and don't always depend upon technology to bail you out. But cell service it's getting better, but the GPS stuff, you got to be careful with that. Some of the places are pretty easy to get to. Park office is generally pretty good, but sometimes they want you to go out some side road to come back and way back it around. It just makes no sense. But don't depend on the cell phone. But once you get here, it doesn't take long to get acclimatized. You stop at the park office, get a park map, and start using those basic navigational skills again, and you'll be perfectly fine.
Dale, I want to thank you so much for talking to us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for letting me talk to you about Cook Forest.
I want to thank my guest Dale Luthringer for joining the podcast. Be sure to follow us on Instagram and Meta for more information about upcoming episodes. You can support the podcast by buying merch at hemlockstohellbenders.com, or you can click support this show in the podcast description to provide a monthly donation. This has been Hemlocks to Hellbenders. I'll see you out there. Hosting, production, and editing by Christian Alexanderson. Music by John Sauer. Graphics by Matt Davis.